You're not tired, you're just carrying things that drain you every single day. Joe Dispenza. You're tired, not just physically, it's something deeper, a constant inner weight, the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. You wake up and already feel like you've lost. There's always something missing. Energy slips away, money doesn't stay, joy feels like a memory, and worst of all, you start thinking, maybe it's your fault. But what if I told you, it's not you? It's the 7 things you never learned to destroy. They live inside you like quiet saboteurs, slowly draining your strength, your will, your clarity. These 7 forces are not random. They are universal. They've wrecked lives, careers, families, and yet they can be dismantled if you're willing to face them. You try to be productive, but you scroll endlessly. You try to save, but money burns in your hands. You try to feel love, but something inside is always numb. You're not broken. You're just hijacked by patterns so old they feel like part of your personality. But they're not. They're the remains of pain you never chose but started carrying long ago. Here's the truth no one tells you. Motivation won't save you. Vision boards, books, morning routines, they all collapse if these 7 destroyers still live inside. Every famous, powerful, truly alive person, they faced them. They went through the dark, and that's why they rose. Not because they were better, but because they got honest. This isn't about feeling better. It's about finally seeing what's real. These 7 things are not bad habits. They are psychological parasites. They disguise themselves as normal. But they're the reason you're stuck. Not your lack of discipline, not your age, not your past. And if you're still here, still listening, maybe you're ready to hear what others avoid. This is not easy, but it's necessary. The cost of staying blind is too high. Your energy, your time, your money, your relationships, they're bleeding out through invisible wounds. Until you stop the bleeding, nothing will change. So let's begin. But before we go deeper, if these words hit something real in you, subscribe to the channel. It's not just for you, it's for those who also suffer in silence. Let's make sure this truth reaches the ones who are ready to stop pretending. And if you want more honest, raw content, join the Telegram. No filters, no sugarcoating, just the truth. Now, let's talk about the first destroyer. The first destroyer is addiction. And no, not just the obvious kind. Addiction to substances, yes, but also addiction to screens, to scrolling, to validation, to drama, to comparison, to control. Addiction is anything you keep doing, even though it keeps hurting you. It hides in plain sight, disguised as just how life is. But it's not life, it's escape. And the more you escape, the more empty you feel. Because the pain never leaves, it just waits. Every time you open your phone without purpose, every time you eat without hunger, every time you chase a hit of dopamine just to avoid silence, you are feeding the loop. And that loop is feeding off you. Addiction is not a weakness. It's a response, a signal. It tells you where something inside you is starving. Most people never ask what they're really hungry for. They just keep feeding the hunger with whatever numbs it fastest. That's why addiction survives, because it offers comfort without resolution. It gives you relief without change, but the price is high. It steals your time, your presence, your ability to be with discomfort, which is where real transformation begins. People don't ruin their lives because they're lazy. They ruin them because they're in pain, and no one taught them how to feel it without drowning. Every person you admire, every artist, leader, creator faced this war. Many lost. Some barely made it back. But the ones who did, they didn't fight addiction by force. They listened. They traced the craving back to its origin. They learned to sit with their hunger without feeding it trash. That's how you take your power back, not by quitting something cold, but by learning what it was giving you. That's where the grip breaks. When you finally stop asking, "Why can't I stop?" and start asking, "What am I avoiding?" That's when everything shifts. This is not about becoming clean. It's about becoming conscious. You can't delete a behavior if you still need what it gives you. You need to replace the loop, not with another distraction, but with truth, stillness, presence, pain, even, but pain that leads somewhere. Most people numb because feeling feels dangerous, but truth is, numbness is what's killing them. Nothing in you needs to be destroyed. It needs to be seen, understood, witnessed without shame. That's what breaks the cycle. Because addiction can't survive in clarity. It needs confusion to grow. So here's the paradox. Your addiction is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It shows you exactly where you abandoned yourself, where the real wound lives. And if you have the courage to face that place, not with force, but with honesty, the addiction begins to fade. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly and permanently. Because now, you're not escaping, you're returning. The second destroyer is self-criticism. That constant, brutal voice inside your head that tells you you're never doing enough, never getting it right, never living up to what you should be. It sounds like discipline, but it's not. It's violence, dressed up as responsibility. It whispers that you're behind, that you're weak, that you don't deserve rest, love, or success until you've earned them. And no matter what you achieve, the voice moves the goalpost. This isn't motivation, it's psychological warfare. And the worst part? You think it's helping you. You think without it, you'd fall apart. But the truth is, it's the very thing keeping you stuck. This inner critic didn't come from nowhere. You weren't born doubting your worth. That voice was installed, sometimes by a parent, sometimes a teacher, sometimes by culture itself. But over time, you began to believe it was you. You made its voice your own. And now, every time you try to grow, to rest, to simply breathe, it tightens the leash. It tells you you're selfish for taking care of yourself, lazy for slowing down, arrogant for believing you could want more. That voice keeps you small. And the tragedy is, you call it realism. People often think the problem is low self-esteem. It's not. The problem is self-attack. And it doesn't matter how many affirmations you repeat or how many goals you crush. If that critic is still running the show, you will never feel whole. Because it feeds on pressure, not progress. It only sees what's missing, and it blinds you to what's already working. You could be healing, growing, learning, but all you will feel is not enough. That's how it keeps control, not by telling you you're worthless, but by convincing you you're always almost there, but never quite. Some of the most outwardly successful people live in constant internal violence. They wake up with dread, go to sleep with guilt. Not because they're failing, but because their inner voice won't let them stop. It's never silent, never satisfied. Steve Jobs once said that for years, no success could drown out the feeling of being a disappointment. That's what this voice does. It erases reality and replaces it with anxiety. It doesn't care what you've done. It only focuses on what you haven't. So how do you break it? Not by fighting back with more criticism, but by noticing it, hearing it without merging with it, creating space between the voice and your truth. One simple practice. Ask yourself, Whose voice is that really? And would you say the same things to a child you loved? If not, then why do you allow them to live in your head every day, unchallenged? This is the beginning of freedom. When you stop letting your worth be a moving target and start recognizing that the critic was never your friend, just a scared part of you trying to survive. The third destroyer is the fear of becoming who you really are. It sounds strange, but most people aren't held back by failure. They're paralyzed by the idea of their own potential. There's a hidden terror in the thought that you could actually succeed, actually be seen, actually take up space in the world. Because deep down, you know it would change everything. You'd have to let go of the roles you play, the people you please, the safety of being small. And that's terrifying, not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. The mind craves certainty, even if that certainty is misery. It would rather stay in the cage it knows than walk into a future it can't control. This fear is often masked as procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt. But at the root, it's not about not knowing what to do. It's about fearing who you'd become if you finally did it. We're trained to fear our own power, to see confidence as arrogance, to see ambition as selfishness, to see standing out as dangerous. And if you grew up around people who felt small, unsafe, unseen, then you learned to shrink yourself out of loyalty. You learned that shining might get you punished, so you kept yourself dim. You convinced yourself that dreams are naive, that settling is wise, that waiting is responsible. But what you were really doing was protecting yourself from being fully alive. Here's the paradox. Staying in your comfort zone doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like quiet decay. It feels like knowing there's more in you and pretending there isn't. That's not peace. That's resignation. And it's the slowest kind of death. People think the leap into self-expression is too risky, but the real risk is staying numb. Because that numbness leaks into everything, your relationships, your work, your health. You can't silence one part of yourself without silencing them all. And eventually, the cost of staying small becomes greater than the fear of expansion. Every iconic person you admire faced this threshold. Oprah said her biggest fear wasn't being poor, it was being powerful. Because that meant she'd have no excuses left, no one to blame, just herself and her choices. That's what real growth demands: responsibility, presence, and the willingness to be misunderstood. Because stepping into your full self will trigger people. It will threaten those who benefit from your silence. And unless you're ready to lose their approval, you'll never gain your freedom. So, what do? You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop negotiating with fear. You take one step, not because you're confident, but because you're tired of hiding. You show up imperfectly, awkwardly, honestly, and you keep going, not to prove anything, but because the alternative, staying invisible, is no longer an option. The fourth destroyer is the need for approval. This one runs deep because it hides beneath what we call kindness, empathy, humility. But make no mistake, when your worth depends on someone else's validation, you are not living, you are performing. You smile when you want to scream. You agree when everything inside you says no. You apologize for existing too loudly. And the tragedy is, most people will never notice, because you've gotten so good at making yourself small, compliant, pleasant. But inside, you're exhausted, not from life, but from constantly managing how others see you. Approval addiction doesn't look like weakness. It often looks like being the strong one, the helper, the reliable one. You shapeshift to avoid rejection. You scan every room for cues. Am I too much? Too little? Too honest? Too quiet? You try to read people before they even speak, because somewhere deep in your nervous system, you learned that being loved meant being useful, that love had to be earned, that being your full self was a risk you couldn't afford. So you became what the world wanted and lost track of who you were. This pattern is brutal because it never ends. No amount of praise satisfies it. No relationship feels safe enough. Even in moments of connection, you wait for the moment it turns. You live in anticipation of abandonment, and you keep giving more, proving more, pleasing more, just to postpone the inevitable. But here's the truth. People-pleasing isn't love. It's self-erasure, and it doesn't protect you from rejection. It guarantees it, because you end up rejecting yourself first. Many brilliant people spent years stuck in this loop. Robin Williams made the whole world laugh while drowning inside. He gave endlessly, but couldn't receive. He feared being seen beyond the jokes. Because when your identity is built on pleasing others, silence becomes terrifying. You don't know who you are without the applause. And the moment it stops, the panic sets in. That's not connection, that's survival. So how do you break it? By telling the truth. Even when your voice shakes, even when it costs you something, you start saying no when you mean no. You stop pretending to agree. You stop over-explaining. You let people be uncomfortable. And you trust that those who truly belong in your life won't leave when you stop performing. Because here's the paradox. The more you try to be loved by everyone, the less love you actually feel. Real connection begins when you're finally honest. Not perfect, not pleasing, just real. And if that scares people away, let them go. Approval means nothing if it costs you yourself. The fifth destroyer is what you put into your body when no one is watching. This isn't just about food. It's about the quiet decisions you make when you feel empty, stressed, angry, unseen. The snacks at midnight. The energy drinks just to stay functional. The meals you eat not out of hunger, but to distract yourself from a feeling you can't name. You tell yourself, it's just a habit, just a taste, just comfort. But behind every bite, there's something deeper. An attempt to regulate emotions you've never learned to face directly. What you consume is often a reflection of what you're trying to avoid. And the cost is not just physical. It's psychological, emotional, even spiritual. When your body is inflamed, overstimulated, or numb, your mind follows. Foggy thinking, mood swings, anxiety, burnout, these aren't always random. They're feedback, signals. But most people ignore them because changing how you eat means confronting why you eat. And that's the hard part. It's never just about the sugar or caffeine or processed food. It's about the moment in the day where you feel powerless and the food gives you a brief illusion of control. It's the loneliness you carry and the crunch of chips gives you just enough stimulation to drown it out. These patterns don't make you weak, they make you human. But the longer you ignore them, the more disconnected you become from your own body's truth. Arnold Schwarzenegger once said that everything changed for him when he realized his body was not an object. It was a message. It reflected his discipline, his pain, his mindset, his emotional state. That's the shift. When you stop seeing eating as survival or entertainment and start seeing it as a mirror, every craving becomes a question. What am I really needing? Is this hunger, or is this a request for rest, movement, connection? Most people don't listen. They override, and then wonder why they feel sick, dull, tired, out of alignment. You can't poison the body and expect the mind to stay clear. This isn't about dieting. It's about honesty. It's about learning the language of your body. Understanding that what feels like sabotage is often a cry for help. You don't need to count calories or punish yourself. You need to slow down, taste, feel, ask. You need to reclaim eating as an act of self-respect, not compensation for what you refuse to feel. Because no food will ever satisfy an emotional wound. It might silence it for a moment, but it always returns, louder. So the practice is simple, but not easy. Awareness. When you reach for something, pause. What emotion is present? What sensation are you trying to escape? This moment of pause is where the pattern breaks, not by force, but by truth. And over time, you stop using food to run. You start using it to return to yourself, your needs, your vitality. Because how you feed your body is how you relate to your own worth, and you deserve to stop consuming pain. The sixth destroyer is comparison. It seems harmless at first, just a scroll through someone else's life, a glance at someone's success, body, partner, home. But it builds, quietly, until your own life feels insufficient, until your achievements seem irrelevant, until every moment of joy gets filtered through a lens of not enough. Comparison is one of the most effective tools for self-destruction because it's subtle. It doesn't attack you directly. It whispers. It creates distance between who you are and who you think you should be. It convinces you that someone else's timeline, body, bank account, or story is the measurement of your value. But here's the truth. Comparison is a lie. It's based on fragments. You're comparing your raw footage to someone else's highlight reel. Your entire history, with all its complexity, against a curated moment frozen in pixels. You don't see the breakdowns, the fear, the grief behind their smile. You only see what they want you to see. And yet, your nervous system responds as if it's real, as if you're falling behind, failing, missing out. This constant sense of inadequacy becomes your baseline, and you start living not to experience life, but to compete in it, not to feel, but to impress. Comparison doesn't just drain your joy, it steals your identity. You stop asking what you truly want. You start chasing what looks good, what gets applause, what's safe. You betray your unique path to fit into someone else's mold. And every time you do that, a small part of you dies, not visibly, but quietly, in your enthusiasm, in your creativity, in your intuition. You start doubting yourself, not because you're wrong, but because you're trying to live someone else's truth. And that disconnect is what creates the internal war. Adele once said that after she became famous, she had to stop reading anything about herself online because the comparisons started to warp her. She began to doubt her voice, her body, her art. That's the cost. Even at the top, comparison tries to pull you down. And unless you learn how to recognize it, it will follow you everywhere, no matter how much you achieve. Because comparison isn't about others. It's about the parts of you that don't feel whole, the wounds that haven't been seen, the parts still waiting for permission to exist. So how do you stop? You return. You come back to your center. You ground yourself in your actual life, not the imagined ones online. You begin to track your own metrics, your peace, your courage, your healing, your honesty. You start celebrating progress that no one claps for, like setting boundaries, resting without guilt, telling the truth. And you create space from whatever feeds the illusion. Mute, unfollow, disconnect. Not out of bitterness, but protection. Because your energy is too sacred to be drained by someone else's projection. Comparison is a thief, but you don't have to let it steal from you anymore. Your path is valid, even if no one sees it yet. Your timing is divine, even if it looks slow. And your value? It was never up for debate. You were never meant to be like anyone else. You were meant to be real. And that is more than enough. The seventh destroyer is hiding from pain. Every time you distract yourself from what hurts, you bury a part of your truth. You run into work, into noise, into comfort. But pain doesn't disappear. It waits. It speaks through anxiety, fatigue, anger, emptiness. The more you avoid it, the louder it gets. Pain is not your enemy. It's a message. It's your system asking to be heard. So stop running. Sit with it. 1 minute a day. Breathe into the discomfort. Ask it, what do you need from me? Write it down. Let the truth speak. Without fixing, judging, escaping. That's the practice. One honest pause at a time. If you understand this, subscribe to the channel. Let this message reach the ones who are done hiding. And join the Telegram for real conversations beyond the noise. If this spoke to you, leave a comment. I no longer run from pain. Let's see how many here are truly ready for truth.